So hi, I'm Lars. I'm one of the co-producers of this conference. It's a great pleasure to see you all here, and it's also an amazing pleasure to see these two guests here. Um, Let me introduce Alexander Steinhart real quick. I think he made the longest way here, all the way from Berlin. He's the co-founder and CEO of Offtime. And here, Fred Stutzman. He didn't have. Did I say your last name right? I could say in very German Stutzman, but I don't think that's correct. So he's the CEO of Freedom. He didn't have such a long way, but he, still. Thank you so much for being here. So we invited you both because you have a very, very strong mission. Actually, also a very similar mission in a sense. You want to make people work better. In a sense, you also want to make them less, which I believe is sometimes the same thing. You certainly want people to be less distracted at work. So both of you invented an app that in a way is a little crazy because people pay money for your apps, and these apps turn their 600 bucks smartphone into a pretty useless piece of metal and glass you can't even check your emails with, and the app turns their MacBook, notebook, expensive computer into a typewriter that can't even go online. So why on earth does humanity need that? Who wants to start? Technology is such an evil thing.
Why does humanity need that? I think Joshua said it before already quite well. When you look at history and everything and what he said, what's now the challenge is the mental health. We are connected all the time, but somehow we are not really made to be connected 24 hours a day. That's just not human, and you can keep up with the multitasking computers do, but even computers can't multitask. They single task very fast, and you won't be able to keep up. And drinking from the internet is this metaphor with drinking from the hydrant, and there's no possibility to customize your connectivity to really focus on stuff. Plus, there are all the technology companies who really fight for your attention. So fighting against them is really an impossible task for your discipline and everything else. So you really need this technology to move beyond this on and off switch to really customize it in a way you really need it. It might be really to have a talk with your family, with friends. It might be to focus on work, for your creativity, to write. It might be just time for yourself, to meditate, solitude, to be not distracted. So that's the reason why people pay it, and that's the reason why we need it as people.
Fred, why do you think pay people for your crazy app?
So I thought it was interesting how you brought up the price points of the devices that we use. So our MacBooks are thousands of dollars, our iPhones, over the course of a lifetime, thousands of dollars. We spend this money with an expected return on this investment that will achieve things, will produce things. But when you think about what a phone is like, a smartphone or a computer is like, it's in trying to work on it. I think of it as trying to work on your television. So there's really no delineation between the social, the entertainment, and the work. And this is a very missing piece of sort of the productive and effective work habits when you're trying to use modern technology. And so, we see the software that we build, these multi-platform products that help people manage distractions across devices, as kind of the essential component to allow some segmentation between the social, the work, and exert control over the device. And that's very powerful. And I think, at the end of the day, that's what people are paying for.
So we as humans are such a talented and intelligent species, right? As most of the times, or let's say sometimes. So what exactly is it that turns us into these monkeys once in a while that know, I should work. I actually want to work. I even enjoy my work, and yet I go on Facebook and refresh the page because I haven't looked on Facebook the last 15 seconds, maybe something new has come up, and I don't do the things my brain would really like me to do, or at least a part of my brain. So what exactly is it that turns us into these junkies sometimes, into these really not very functional workers or dads or moms?
I know you know this well. You want to handle it? I can take a stab. So there's Charles Duhigg. I mean, in the behavioral psychology literature, there's a long study of habits and habitual behavior. Charles Duhigg wrote a book a couple years ago called The Power of Habits. Nir Eyal sort of extended this model to thinking about habits and technology. And we can see a very addictive cycle here. So the idea of the trigger, the reward, and just kind of closing the loop. So you think about, why do we check social media? Why do we go back to our phones and refresh? There's certainly the dopamine hit. You get conditioned to know that there's something there. And one of the interesting things about, I think, both of our software, the people who use the software, when you start to detach, when you start to take time away from these dopamine hits, you realize that the world doesn't end when you step away from Facebook, Instagram, Slack, Twitter, what have you. It's still there, but we've been conditioned in this habit and trigger cycle to conditionally, keep going back, and it's very powerful. It's fighting against every urge in our being to pull ourselves away from these distractions.
I know that Alexander, I've interviewed him before, I know that he likes to compare the way we deal with technology and with being online with the way we handle food. So the way we handled food after the war in Europe, and the way it had a whole evolution going to vegan food, vegetarian food, and just healthy food in general. So maybe you can explain us what what our addiction has to do with that.
I think any comparison to history, or looking back at history, or any analogies really help. It might be food and nutrition, it might be smoking, it might be other truck stuff we have and consume. It might also be city planning, how we plan a city and make it less stressful. I think those are really a lot of helpful analogies. A nice one is indeed the food analogy. Like after the Second World War, we moved from this food shortage to food affluence, and we had first to learn how to cope with it. Like my grandmother really put loads of butter on the bread and everything, and there was fat and sugar and everything. And next to this affluence of food, where we have to learn, there came this junk food industry, and the junk food industry really also played with our weakness of loving it. I mean, pizza and sweets and chips, they are all nice and they all taste nice, and also the likes on Facebook, they taste very nice. But when you really look on the value of nutrition, or also on the added value of information you get from likes, it's really, really little. And so this junk food is what you say, with the conditioning on it, there's the feedback, there are those loops in there, and somehow we really have to learn how to cope with it, how to do it, and also see how we influence the industry in a way that it makes us healthier. I mean, now it starts in the US that on sugar, on Coca-Cola, there are more taxes because people can just not cope with drinking little of it. And I think the same will also happen with information technology. The technology which makes us more addictive and also doesn't have any added value will also be more heavily taxed. And somehow we have to balance it, but I think it still takes a long time until we get there. And I think we still gonna eat and consume quite a lot of media.
So when we look at food, it's the combination of, I think, fat, salt, and sugar, which makes us very addicted. So what exactly is it that makes websites like Facebook or YouTube so addictive, or any other website that keeps us distracted? What exactly is it? How is it designed in a way that we can't get off?
I think we could, there's a lot of ways we could think about this. So one is just the alternatives. So when we sit down to our devices, maybe you have some work to do, you have to write a report, you have to produce some thing that you're maybe not so excited about. Having these easy alternatives, which provide the low nutritional value, as Alexander's saying, but are constantly being updated, are presented to you in a way that is designed to manipulate designed to manipulate you. We go back to it again and again. I like to think of this as sort of an arms race, this real imbalance. So, we're just learning how to deal with the richness and the hotness of this media that these phones that we carry. And so we're in an evolutionary sense, we're in no way adjusted to this technology, but we are competing against the technology and all of the people who are behind the scenes in the technology, hundreds of PhDs in social psychology that are doing really large studies, behavioral studies, to figure out the best ways to attract our attention. And in that sense, it's extremely imbalanced, and we're sort of naturally drawn to it as a result. It does become very addictive.
I can only add to it. It's like this whole system of gamification of different methods to just engage us in a way. And on the other side, there's the evolutionary perspective on it. I mean, in the past, it was necessary to survive, to learn. So we are all wired to learn, and new information just makes us happy. It just like produces dopamine. And then next to this internet of learning came the social media. And we are also like social animals. The connection to friends, to important people, it's just so rich, and it's like being part of a group, having the connections to people who are important to us. It's so important to us, and then you connect both together, and you have social media, and that was also the took off of the whole internet, and the devices. Without this social media and everything, we wouldn't be with the 2 million connected devices. So it's this evolution in there, and I think it will even more grow when we get to virtual reality, which makes it even more difficult for our body, for our mind to distinguish, and it will be such an addictive experience, and we just go back to this experience. And when there's the next device who can mimic this and it's in the right price range, it will just take off, and in 5 years after that, everybody is somehow in virtual reality. And there's also the escapism when you go on a more philosophical level. It's just easier to distract yourself than really deal with yourself and what's coming up.
So, I mean, I don't want to just blame these evil websites and technology. I mean, of course, we play a crucial part in this. I was thinking, if we liked what we do in our jobs more, would we be less distracted? Are we just all the people who are these monkeys once in a while? I am a pretty monkey kind of person very often. So, but I do like my job. Do you think it plays a role? Like, are we less distracted from jobs that are better, that are of a higher quality, that leave us more freedom, whatever?
I think the first step is to just kind of allow yourself to have time on these sites and realize that it's a natural part of engagement with technology today. So, Alex's point about we're social animals, and these technologies play on our deepest social motives. I mean, it's not abnormal that we would be drawn to these things, and it's totally normal that we want to spend time on them. So we could think about maybe the problem is one of time budgeting. And so, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, or 40 years ago now, we're talking about the problems with television and say, okay, well, if you spend too much time on TV, you're not going to get your work done. And we've actually said this about every media. You read books too much, you're not going to get your work done. And we're going to be saying it about VR and everything.
That's a long time ago.
That's a long time ago, but in the history of media criticism, it's always been a consistent theme. And so it's just a natural part of it. To your question about how do we, if we had better alternatives, would we spend less time on the media? I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's probably a logical way to say yes. If we were completely engaged in everything that we did, we would spend less time on alternatives. But there is always going to need to be some alternatives so we can balance out where our information budgets lie.
Okay, so how do we learn to cope better? What do we need? What skills are missing? How can we do? How can we work better and maybe less? It can't only be your apps.
I think what's interesting, what came up when we did some more digital detox retreats, not just like on daily life, how you can connect or customize your connectivity, but really taking off for longer. What I realized was also that people have difficulties to cope with their solitude, boredom, and they didn't know what to do. I mean, they suddenly had 2 hours more they didn't spend in front of the devices, and they sat in the rooms opposite of each other and was like, okay, what shall we do? And then they really played games, or they went for a walk, and then in the final evaluation, it was like, oh, we didn't have enough time for self-reflection and everything. even though it was in the program, but people just like distracted themselves with other things. And I think that's an important part, just to also learn how you use this time, how you cope with the boredom, how you cope with solitude, and making this an important perspective, also an important part of the education of the kids, that they really can cope with it and that they can handle it and have this richness of alternatives. And I think it's not just shutting away the internet and everything, and that's also difficulties we have, because somehow we want to fight it and change it, but the dimension is always technology, no technology, and I think we've got to move beyond this dualism and also
Right.
look for new values in there.
Exactly. So right now your apps are really very much about just shutting things down, right? And so that, I guess, that is only a first step, and I'm sure you're planning to help people use technology with your technology in a more complex way. So what's next? Like what's next after just shutting things down?
So yeah, and just kind of what we do is we have a platform that allows people to block distractions across multiple devices. So you can turn off email, Facebook, things like that on your iPhone, your Mac, your Windows device. We make that easy for people. So that's what we do. And yeah, as you're saying, it's kind of step one, and where we and doing that, we've had some good success and things like that. But really, the challenge is, how do we make people's work experience better? How do we give them better quality work time? So one of the things that we've seen, and we've seen this in studies, even the availability of alternatives will reduce someone's cognitive load. It will, increase someone's cognitive load. It will make them work in a poorer fashion. And so if we are able to give people better quality work experiences through both blocking distractions, but also being contextually aware of the work. So it's one thing to say, okay, well, let's turn off Facebook for the next hour so you can get work done. But can we do things like, when you open up Google Drive, or you open up a Google Doc, know that you want to work, and say, set up your environment for you in that sense. Turn off notifications on all your devices, turn off distractions on your devices, things like that. Because we think we can give people back a good bit. We can increase their amount of quality time working each day, and I think that's really powerful.
But then technology will start controlling you again, just in a different way.
I think, yeah, I mean, so, the way that we think about this is, you can kind of look at people and say, all right, well, you're spending so much time on Facebook, you're spending so much time on these sites, you're not getting your work done. Like, it's a fundamental failing with people. We look at it as a fundamental failing with technology. So really, it's the missing piece of technology. That we've been thinking about all of these measurable improvements. So CPU speed, graphics, your battery length, all of these things that the industry can look at and say, we've measurably improved, but we're not thinking about the experience. We're not thinking about how do we actually provide a better experience for people who are using these devices. So I think it's inherently a technological solution, and I don't know if it's you're giving up control or you're getting more control, but I mean that's the side of the argument that we come down on.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's sometimes also less is more in some sense, and the pre-planning and what is control, what's not control. And there are always those studies about willpower, and many people say, oh, it's a lack of discipline that you use your device, but discipline is also just like a limited resources, a muscle which you can train or not train, and the sense in most of the willpower studies is like it comes down how you pre-plan your environment and how you just adjust it, that you don't have to cope all the time with it. So having this sweets all the time at home, it's not the best method for not eating sweets. It's more like not buying it. And the same for not coping with distractions. It's also pre-planning your workday and just looking that there are not enough distractions in there. So opening up, setting up freedom Offtime, that it just like sets you in the right mood when you want to write. It's just like pre-planning and just like working with yourself.
Okay, I'm very distracted by Amo right now. I think he wants to tell us something. Do we have time for some questions, or one or two questions?
We thank these guys for their wonderful talk.
Yeah.